New Bradford. I didn't think they were ever going to stop playing that song.
We love that song.
Yes, we love the way you sing it now. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to West Valley Center for Spiritual Living. My name is Reverend Clyde Goings, and I am the assistant minister here. So, welcome to this beautiful Sunday morning. Hello, everybody online. We'll welcome you guys online as well. We look forward to seeing you here in the center when you're ready to come in. And if we have any new people, because I keep forgetting to welcome the new people, if you're new here for the first time, we want to welcome you as well. And we are just moving along, and everything in the center keeps evolving. And so I am so excited about it. So I have to share with you just real quick. So last night I finally, they've opened up the theaters again. So I finally got to go to a theater last night, and I went to watch Still Magnolia. We were talking about it in the back, and what it reminded me of is, it was a great play, by the way, but just the idea with, those, well, you get a bunch of women in there talking to each other in the beauty salon, but that's a whole different story. That
does sound real fun.
No idea.
But the thing that I loved about it is just the loving connection that they had. And I just remembered that, back in 2020, we had to create bubbles, right, to be safe with people. And so, we're moving forward and moving, hopefully soon COVID will be in the rearview mirror, but, just really honoring our family and our friends and how much we depend on them. And what I think of is that every one of us are agents of God, right? So we show up in love and support of everybody else, and we also receive that love from everybody else. So just something to remember. Just like every Sunday we come together to remember the truth, that we're whole, perfect, and complete, just the way that we are. So I just love this place, and I love that you guys are all here. So is Cheryl going to get the vision statement up on there? No. All right, so we are going to say the vision statement. This is a pop quiz to see if you can have that vision statement memorized. So we're going to say the vision statement together. We are a loving, joy-filled community, honoring the many paths to God as we learn and live the Science of Mind principles. So it is. So just want to, we have a lot of announcements that are showing up on the slideshow, and one thing I do want to point out really quickly is that on two things, really. We're having a drumming afterwards today. Drumming today afterwards, after the service. And then also on Sundays, we are starting to do our meditation at 9:30 to 9:45. So if you want to come in before the service, we'll be doing it in Patkey Hall back here in this corner. So we're welcoming everybody if you want to sit in meditation. So we need to get our spiritual practice on.
Yes, yes.
So now we're going to get our service on. So if everybody will just simply relax in their place, right where they are, open up their hearts and minds to the Bradford's beautiful music and Reverend Karen's beautiful message, as we know that we're whole, perfect, and complete right here, right now.
Will make a quiet place within my heart. I will wait upon the Lord, wait upon the Lord.
Be still, my soul, be still. Be still, my soul, be still. Be still and know.
I will make a quiet place within my mind. I will wait upon the Lord, wait upon the Lord.
Be still, my soul, be still. Be still and know
I will make a quiet place within my life, and I will wait upon the Lord, wait upon the Lord. I will make a quiet place.
Right here, right now, in the presence and the activity of that sweet spirit that is pure love, peace, joy, happiness, kindness, caring, compassion, health, prosperity, wisdom, and clarity, and oh so very, very much more. I know that that is the power that lives and moves and has its being, that expresses as me. It expresses as everyone in this room. It expresses in everyone, everywhere. And it is unstoppable, that exquisite divine force. And I know that in spite of any external circumstance, that it is always present, that that divine lifts us and shifts us to constantly be moving forward. So I know that this service is a divine idea, that it is divine perfection. So as we move forward, the Bradford's music continues to lift us. The Reverend Karen's message, as always, is divinely guided. It lifts us, it moves us, it touches us, and allows us to be able to step into the next great expression. So with a grateful heart, I release this into the law and love that always says yes, and so it is. And first, I'm going to have a quote from Helen Keller. The struggle of life is one of our greatest blessings. It makes us patient, sensitive, and godlike. It teaches us that although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. But mostly my reading is from a book called Tough Times Never Last, but Tough People Do. It's from the 90s. It's a Robert Schuller book, and it always touches my heart. So this section says, Knute Rockne said, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. When the roads are rough, the tough rise to the occasion. They win, they survive, they come out on top. People are like potatoes. After potatoes have been harvested, they have to be spread out and sorted in order to get the maximum market dollar. They're divided according to size, big, medium, and small. It is only after the potatoes have been sorted and bagged that they can be loaded onto trucks. This is the method that was used in Idaho for years. One farmer never bothered to sort his potatoes, yet he seemed to be making the most money, and a puzzled neighbor finally asked, "What is your secret?" He said, "I load up the wagon with potatoes and take the roughest road to town. During that 8-mile trip, the little potatoes fall to the bottom, the medium potatoes land in the middle, while the big potatoes rise to the top." That is not only true with potatoes, it is the law of life. Big potatoes rise to the top on rough roads, and tough people rise to the top in rough times. Tough times never last, but tough people do. So just enjoy that notion of being a potato that has risen to the top. So it is.
Life has taught me this, every day is new. And if anything is true, all that matters when we're through is how we love. Faced with what we lack, some things fall apart, but from the ashes new dreams start. All that matters to the heart chances come again. If we lose or if we win, all that matters in the end is how we love. How we love. How we love. I will not forget your kindness when I needed it so much. Sometimes we forget, trying to be so strong in this world of right and wrong. All that matters when we're gone, all that mattered all along, all we have that carries on is how we love.
Can you tell me where that is from?
Beth Nielsen Chapman.
Wow, that was so beautiful. Good morning.
Good morning.
Some lights, please. We're hot. Something's hot up here. uh-huh. I'm gonna guess, there it is, she found it, fabulous, thank you. We have a sub in the sound booth. Would that be a scary place to sub? Minister's so picky. Thank you for, Bradford's, thank you for the way you have been willing to change up the music. You know, I was thinking back when you did this, every week you do the prayer song before the prayer. It gets better and better, and I don't know what you did to the guitar. I don't need to know. Mechanical music is hard for my brain. But that's one of my favorite songs, and when I first started ministry, the first Science of Mind church where I really fell in love with the service, they did in this very room, in the most exquisite fashion I'd ever heard it, and I've always wanted that. So I've had all these musicians show up and they go, what do you want us to do for that? And I'll go, in that very room, and nobody does it well. And so it's been disappointing for me because I've been looking for whatever that was in my those early days where you just are in that zealousness for the experience that makes it a whole package, and you have done it. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm so grateful. I think it was Clyde that came up with the song choice. You learned it, you changed it, and now here's the funny part. We were just telling them last week, we like it better than the original now. Shh, don't tell Michael Gott. So good morning. Welcome to the West Valley Center for Spiritual Living. I'm Reverend Karen Rice, and I am very honored. I'm actually feeling rather privileged to be here speaking to you this morning because I'm following the CSL theme, which means ministers just like me this morning are talking about rising and reemerging. And if you've been a part of this community for a little while, you will know that that is a theme I have been harping on for at least 2 years, and finally the organization has come around to see things my way. So I'm quite happy and had no trouble at all wrapping my mind around what needed to be said today. So me and the Holy Spirit got something all figured out for you. Rise and reemerge is the title of the message. And what we're looking at is this way that everything that's been read and spoken, there's a way that after we fall, we rise, we emerge again, we come out of the ashes. And we have this theme then of rising triumphant after feeling defeated. And I just think there are so many ways there has been a heaviness of all the, being sequestered and feeling separated from each other and all the things we've had to deal with in quite a while now. That this is a perfect day to know that we are united, that all the spiritual centers and the ministers are looking at this very idea. And here's what it felt like to me when I sat down to go, what do you want to say today? It feels to me like we have unified in this bold proclamation, a declaration we are saying to life in that triumphant way, we will not be defeated.
Amen.
Thank you. That's a big amen for me. And so we know who and what supports us. In this teaching, we are really clear. We go back to source every week. We start in the same place. And in that way that we're uniting in talking about rising and re-emerging now calls a theme into our lives that we're on the cusp of something really exciting. So I've been excited about delivering this message. The quote that inspired me, and really I do think it's one of Dr. Holmes' some of his best work. It comes from the book, This Thing Called You. But listen to this quote, short, sweet, makes so much sense. No matter what the negations of yesterday may have been, your affirmations of today may rise triumphant over them. No matter what has happened in our past, what we are willing to affirm today will rise triumphant over any negative experiences or challenges or difficulties. We just stand in his position, but he is empowering us by saying it is our affirming those truths that will allow us to rise, that will actually be the energetic that causes us to be like a buoy out at sea that floats up no matter what. So rise and reemerge. This feels to me like this great instinct that we can witness in nature. We can see it in all of life, but more than that, it's in us as well. In the study of biology, in biology they study life and life processes and this process of evolution as the way we see it in nature. So in that study of biology, they explain the way life is constantly evolving and changing, that all the plants and the animal kingdoms have this instinct along with us for adapting to new circumstances. So there is always a way to find our balance again after a storm. And I think we've been through some rocky weather. And I don't think it's over. I think we have some work ahead of us. But how wonderful to be uplifted in the very knowing that there's a power and a presence that's greater than we are. And that is what is the process of our rising, preparing us for that re-emerging. Dr. Holmes used the term emergent evolution. And it is a term you have heard me use because it's part of this deep call that I've been feeling for quite a while. I was thinking this morning, I think it's because it's my life story. But it's not just my life story, it's everybody's life story. And I love that it shows up in music and in the reading and in the prayers that we say. So as Dr. Holmes would talk about emergent evolution, he would be talking about the way that in nature, the way that fulfillment comes in nature is because there's a demand. Something happens, something shifts and changes a little bit, and nature has now a demand for change or adaptation, and then that occurs because there's an instinct for it. There's an intelligence in all the cells of all living things. So life is, generally speaking, in every way, forever responding to every need. So when biologically they say to us that all evolution happens because of complexity, well, what that means is things change and reconfigure. You know, I mean, look at marriage or you know, buying a new house. Everything is constantly changing in our lives. Relationships are constantly reshaping themselves. And so in nature, a system will continue to expand. Something good happens in nature. There's all the right things. You know, the plants find the sun and we get enough rain, and then things in nature begin to thrive. But that's part of a system that is growing and expanding. But life is always growing and expanding. Ecosystems are always independently branching out and growing and expanding. And so when it gets greater and greater at the insistence of life itself, then the structures of the systems require change. You know, my husband was in the same field for his 40-year career, however long he worked, and that his job changed regularly. He started in cable TV. And by the time he was done and ready to retire from his occupation, he was an engineer that understood all about what happens in the satellites and how communication travels, and he was training people to understand it so that they could be efficient at their jobs. So all evolution comes from complexity, implies that something gets too complex and maybe it's even going to break apart. The way that I envision it is like a potted plant. If you enjoy houseplants, you may have had that experience. Many of us have. I know Kathy Bradford's an expert because she has a beautiful herb garden. I've been blessed to see it. It died. All the mint you gave me died as soon as it got hot. Sorry.
I'll give you more.
Okay. Are you sure you trust me? A potted plant can only live so long in the pot before it stops thriving because it will get root bound. I love that part about having houseplants. I love that process of getting the potting soil under my fingernails and buying a new pot that's a little bit bigger and getting it in there, and then you water it and it just, oh, doesn't it feel good? You feel like you've just done, you know that the plant feels better. It's like, you know, the plant's going, thank you. And that's how life is. When things when the roots get too bound up in the container we used to be able to live in, it's time for a change. Sometimes structures break down. Swedenborg has that fabulous quote that says, when things fall apart, it's an opportunity for God to rearrange them in a better order. And I do think that that's what we're seeing on the planet right now, that we are living in the time of an end of an era, as another era hasn't quite been outpictured for us yet. We don't exactly know what it looks like and how things are going to be yet. But with a spiritual grounding, we can move through any storm, and then we can rise and reemerge into that newness. And that really is the theme of what needs to be said today, and why I'm so excited. So beyond biology, beyond the world of science, there are all other schools of thought. There are philosophers and mystics and spiritual leaders and psychologists who talk about this same thing, that we, as a part of humanity, we are equipped to rise and emerge through whatever circumstances might be thrown before us. And so they all come together, and I would summarize it by saying it's like the challenges in our lives create breakthroughs, and the breakthroughs in our life are turning points. Turning points. The very thing we need to start looking at whatever's going on from a slightly different perspective. It can be no other way. That's how life is. Complexities have always shown us how adaptable we are. Now, we don't necessarily like it. We don't necessarily like those unexpected changes, even some of the choices we make for change. We'll realize down the road that, oh, it wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be. But the beautiful thing is that we've all had those experiences, which means we have all lived through them, and we've grown because of them. I was thinking for a good example, and the very first thing that popped in my head was a belief I had around, forgive me for all of you men and all of you women who have never given birth, but I'm an old midwife, and I taught childbirth classes and helped deliver babies for a large portion of my early adult life, I guess before I grew up. That's funny. And what that meant, if you're me, that was really funny. But what that meant was I had a lot of beliefs, and that was where I did my social activism. I was certified through an organization called Husband Coached Childbirth. It was the Bradley method. It's gone under. You no longer can have husband coached, and we don't live in that world anymore. But it was a time where we were working. It's the only social activism I actually admit to, is that we were fighting to get dads to have the right to be in the delivery room. And so it was a really big deal. And so I had 4 children, and I had birth at home. I know you can laugh at me, but and that was, I still think it's the right thing to do. Don't even get me started on that. I think it's natural, and that's where we belong. But and there's germs in the hospital and all that. But what I can tell you is that I used to say, because I was always pregnant. In all those years I was teaching pregnant couples. I was a really good example because I was pregnant or nursing a baby while I was teaching, and it was like they were really immersed in the real experience of all of that. And I would say 2 things when it would come to talking about coaches. No, 2, not 1. 2 things I would say. And one was, if for some reason one of you can't make it to class in the next 8 weeks, you need to send the coach, because you're going to have that woman's going to have that baby no matter what. But the coach needs to be trained in how to help the woman so she can be most comfortable in that process and deliver in the way that she desires to deliver that baby, so it can be childbirth that's joyful, not scary and horrible. And I believed that passionately. And then the second thing I would say to couples is, and I know for certain I could never do it without my husband. And so you know what happens when you make such a bold proclamation and you think you know it all. I'm ready to deliver my 4th baby, but we have just moved to Arkansas, and I need to fly home to finalize all the escrow stuff in California. My husband just started a new job, so he can't come, so we find somebody to watch all 3 of the other kids. 3 weeks from my due date, I get on an airplane and fly out here. I was going to fly back home the very next day, but you know what happened. You can guess how the story ended. I ended up delivering the baby the next day without my husband. Now, there are a couple of lessons I learned from that one, and the most bold one, and what is applicable to this conversation, is that I learned I could do something that I completely believed I could not do. And I was certain of that because when I was in labor with those other babies, and he would be at my side when he would get up to go stretch his legs and take a walk and get something to eat, whatever, I would suffer while he was gone. And the moment he came back in the room, I was well behaved, and the pain decreases, you breathe in the rhythm, you got the whole thing, right? But when he wasn't there, I couldn't do it. So I believed that I had tested it. It was scientific as far as I was concerned. But instead, what happened was a group of beautiful women that I loved very much surrounded me the day that I gave birth to Lacey. And so I have this gorgeous memory of the way women can come together to support each other through difficult times. So you have your own story, but the end of the story is that it always turns out on the other side of whatever we just did, we just proved it that we could do it, that all along we were capable of it. And that's where we begin to understand how powerful our minds are, how important it is to notice what we're thinking about and how we're applying that in our life. It is a part of life that adversity strengthens us. It's just, what was that line? Tough
times never last.
Tough times never last, tough people do. And we're all a lot tougher than we thought we were. And you know what? We all know that right now, because though we may be a little tagged from the journey of the last couple years, we see the great things we have done. We haven't just sat around. We have done some things. And boy, can we say that here in this building, with this church. This community has come together and done some great things. So it's no different than you want to work out, you want to get your body a little more fit, and you work out at the gym and you use weights, you're applying a little, you're challenging yourself, and those exercises then grow muscles and you become stronger. I don't know that part personally. I've never played with weights or anything, but I'm trusting that that's true. So life is constantly growing us. It's that intelligence in the universe that is always, that created all of life and is the intelligence that sustains all of that life, is always expanding. And that's how we are. Life is growing us. And I want to be real clear here. I don't like the idea that sometimes we say, oh, God is testing me. It's a test. I don't think God tests us. I think we test us. I think we can be really competitive with ourselves and each other, obviously, but I don't think it's a test. I think that what's happening is we have opportunities where we become aware of ways to maneuver through whatever the challenge is. And we begin, the more we do it, we begin to realize that there is something in this universe that supports us in that growth. So eventually, each of us comes to learn that kind of confidence. And for me, it always comes back to that simple line, there's a power in the universe for good. It's God. It created us. It's a power for good, and we can use it. And so that can stop me from, spiraling into some negativity when I stop and remember that. I want to be uplifted. I want to rise and reemerge. And what happens is the time you spend in the dark gets less and less the more that you apply the principle in your life, the activities we can take. Here are some ideas that I pulled, saying the very same thing, but I wanted you to hear it from diverse views. And so here's a quote I took from Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle is a current author, spiritual leader. He's beloved and brilliant, really. And what he does well, I think, is that he has found a way to be a thought leader in a really universal message. So his message is very similar to, it doesn't deviate much. It's just, again, a different languaging, as I've been mentioning in weeks past. Here's what Eckhart Tolle said regarding the way that crisis prepares consciousness. This is important. In life-threatening emergency situations, there is a shift in consciousness from the realm of time, living in the realm of effect, from time to presence. Your personality recedes in those moments and is replaced by an intense, conscious presence. It's very still, it's very alert, and whatever response is needed then arises from that state of consciousness. So an emergency happens, and we often think like, I don't even remember doing that, that I don't remember reaching for the fire extinguisher or pushing the child out of the way of danger. We don't even remember it. There's something in us has that reaction. Now, I know sometimes in danger we just get stupid. We go, what do you call it? We get paralyzed. We get paralyzed with fear. And I think that we've seen a little bit of that. I think sometimes the way I linger at home a little more than I used to is that paralyzing, or just the weight of how long the pandemic has stretched itself out, and how I don't worry about the pandemic. My concern is for the people and the fear that it stirs in the hearts of people I love. But he's saying something really important here. This is sort of scientific. He's talking about the way the brain works. And in an emergency situation, there's a shift in consciousness. And he says that we get conscious. We're not, the personality fades away. And now we're conscious, alert, aware to what needs to take place. So there's an immediate shift in our attention that serves to aid us, to help us through whatever the immediate crisis is. Holmes has an interesting take on a similar thing in the same way. Holmes says that there's a divine intelligence that specializes us in such occasions. Isn't that good to know? It's like a backup plan. There's a divine intelligence that specializes us when we need it like that. So he goes on to explain it. Now, this is a little meaty, a little thick, a little hard to understand, but man, this is really good stuff. Holmes says that when we come to understand that, he says this often, the more that we remember, we recognize that power, that presence, the more we believe, stand in that place of having a really deep faith of understanding how that intelligence supports life all around us, that the more open to it we are, the more aware of it and the more open we are, that's when it specializes us. And when we open to it, the awareness that calls us to be more aware creates a space where the newness we need is created. It is created in that space. We make the opening, and voila, that's when the law can work. See, so I usually say to you, are you ready to receive? Are you open to receive the good you want? Because that's usually where we just go, we're like, I really want that. Or are you just attached to the wanting, and the actual having is, you don't even maybe know how to comprehend what it would be like to have instead of to want. So this is really good stuff, because Holmes is saying we are calling that good forward with that one mind, with that infinite intelligence. Think of it like, I like to think of it, that motes of dust, I like to use that reference, that infinite intelligence that is just hovering everywhere in every living thing, in every cell of our being, and the rest of life as well. So when we remember, when we are conscious, as Tolle said, to be conscious of it, then that creates the opening, and suddenly we can see the answer to the problem right in front of us. We're not blind anymore. We suddenly have the vision to see the holiness in the truth that's desiring to be revealed in whatever situation it is. So I think I said last week, I talked a little bit about that last week, that the call to call it forward, the way we call it forward is by creating a readiness in our own minds, in our own consciousness. So all the work we do every Sunday morning when I come up here and chat, that we are tilling the earth, the possibilities, the ground of possibility in our own lives, because there is this great field of possibilities, as the quantum physicists call it. So then Holmes says it's that intelligence that will spark our individual intellect. That God stuff sparks our own intellect, and that's what clears the fog away. That's when we can see the truth. So that is why it is so you know, I don't want to use words like urgent, but I feel an urgency about it. I cannot deny that. It is so useful for us to be having this conversation because we want to expect that we will be on the other side of the pandemic, completely free of the pandemic. We want to imagine, what would that be like? What would that feel like? How can I see that in my own mind? What images that can I create so that I am doing what Holmes said in that very first quote? I'm using my affirmations today. I'm affirming something I can see and feel and know as real, and therefore I am creating this space for it. The Holy Spirit can then tap into our individualized intellect to create that, and then it creates. And then it creates. So there's a readiness that we could, and I'm encouraging, that we do collectively to make a bigger container, you know, to help us heal all that fear and the worry and the heaviness of it. Okay, so here's how he said it. So I just explained it all, but here's how he said it. The moment we accept the answer is there, we already have the answer, the answer is immediately created in the mind and will be projected through your intellect as a new creation. So we do the work. Because Tolle and Holmes both said right there, it is a state of consciousness, and anything that is about a state of consciousness implies that we can participate. We are not a victim. I don't like what I'm seeing over here going on in the world, and I don't like the judgments I'm having about what I'm seeing in the world. Then I use my own consciousness and change my mind to see it in a different way. And I open myself for the guidance too. And I have prayer partners that pray regularly for me. That's always a part of my prayer request, is for that to be open to that guidance, because there's always the divine guidance. One more example I wanted to share this morning. West African gentleman named Maladoma Sone. He's an author, a spiritual leader. He's publishing more and more books. And what he does really well is he incorporates the ancestral wisdom and the rituals he learned from being raised in a village in West Africa. In those primitive ways, he takes that wisdom for healing, and he writes beautiful healing words. But his story is quite interesting, because he was taken from his village when he was a small child, and he was given to Jesuit priests to be raised. And so they raised him. He adopted he had a Christianized view now that mingled with his indigenous ways, and he had a great education. They made sure he was well educated. And so as a young man, he returned to the village with the intent that he was going to be able to help the people, his family, his relatives, the people he loved. But they rejected him because he had become too westernized. So all of the goodness that he thought he could share with them, he was not able to do that. He then did some great work around trying to process that, trying to integrate it. Like, wow, I learned all this information, and now how do I use that? And how does this apply to healing? And how can I blend my old ways with my new ways? And he's done a good job of being a great gift to all of us now. But here's his quote. And this quote is so doggone good. This quote is so good. I'm very excited to share it with you. He said this: "It is possible that we have been brought together at this time because we have some profound truths to teach each other. All of us carry within ourselves something that is waiting for the right moment when it can burst out and repair a particular separation that we are experiencing." Wow, that totally aligns to the way we speak to the idea of wholeness. When our body experiences illness, something has separated from the perfection. It's not functioning in that way that is whole, perfect, and complete. So the idea of separation, any particular separation that we're experiencing, well, that shows up in all kinds of ways. When I am separated from a loved one, my heart aches for a reunion, right? For us to be together again. When we are ill and experiencing poor health, our mind and our body yearns for that experience of wellness again, right? And take away our freedom. If we feel we have been separated from our freedom, woo, then you really hear us stand up and say, oh, hell no. You know, there's something in us that desires for the full expression of wholeness, not those separated, isolated parts. And we've experienced a lot of separation in the last couple of years based on the pandemic. Just the pandemic and all the other things that have caused this tremendous polarization. Can you see how separation, how big the bridge is, right? When you think of polarization in any way. And so I would say that when I contemplate this, it causes me to understand it this way. This is how I personalize it. That separation of any sort signals our soul and causes at the level of our soul, we then have a yearning for connection again. And what that really is that sense of wholeness. And if you look at the bigger, greater picture, it's the way we have felt separated from God, which Emma Curtis Hopkins would say, you're good. The way we feel separated from our good. Ralph Waldo Emerson, if you are a student of science of mind, you know that the founder of our teaching, Dr. Ernest Holmes, was influenced first. The first great thinker that influenced Ernest more than anybody else was Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Emerson changed his life. He was a young man when he discovered Emerson. But Emerson was had his life in a time period before Holmes, and when he was 12 years old, he witnessed a bloody battle in the Boston Harbor, where the one ship was going out, they were going to give England what ho, and the other ship came in and blocked the way, and cannons started firing. And so the boys are just, he and his brothers are just boys, and they're going, oh, war, oh, how fun. And then suddenly they realize the impact of what happens when human life is lost. And you can see that it definitely impact. You don't have to study much about Emerson to see that he was deeply feeling and had a lot to say about life in many ways. Emerson said these words, and these words, again, just touch my heart so much. And very much fit my theme of rising and reemerging in the way I use it personally. Is there any period in time where one would desire, if there is any period in time where one would desire to be born, is it not in the age of revolution? When the old and the new stand side by side, and when the glories of the old can be compensated by the rich possibility of the new era, this is a good time to be alive. Remember, he saw some harsh things. And here he is telling us, but there could be no better time to be on the planet. And then he takes it in this way. The old and the new are standing side by side. And he says the glories of the old can be compensated by the rich possibilities of the new era that is trying to manifest on the planet. We are doing that right now. The only problem is we're scared. And we think our way, what we believe most, is the only way, and we have forgotten that there are myriads of ways. A rainbow of possibilities. You can mix colors to the nth degree and create something new again and again. Come on, God does it all the time in the dusk and the dawn. Right? So there are infinite possibilities. What if we could think of what's going on in the world through that type of lens? What if we could do our spiritual work and be conscious and aware and create that space and opening that God might touch us, that spark of intellect that is ours, and we could suddenly see differently what's going on in the world? I think this is important because we, my friends, are part of something really, really big. Doesn't mean we have to like it. But we are definitely, there is no question, we are on the cusp of something that is bursting out to repair a huge separation. There is something emerging that yearns to restore all of us to a sense of wholeness in our living. I think of Rosa Parks. You know, I love that there was that place where Rosa Parks just said, you know, I didn't know I was making history. I just wanted to have a seat on the bus. You know, I didn't intend to change the world. I just wanted to sit down. And then she said these fiery, important words. I was tired of giving in. There comes a time in all of our lives where we hit that place where we just get, sometimes I get mad, sometimes I stomp my foot. You've seen and heard that a lot. I like this podium, this is a nice platform, it makes a big noise for me. But sometimes we have to do that. Enough already. There has to be a better way. There has to be a better way. I think we agree on that. And here's the really funny thing. In spite of or because of how polarized it feels the world is, especially in the last a week or so, we've had some nasty news. Because of all of that, it tells me one thing. It feels to me like no matter what side you are, no matter what color you are, red or blue, no matter what you believe about the government or other countries or cultures, no matter what you think about any of the issues, we're all right there on the cusp of that point going, enough already. Lord, show me another way. Show me something I can see that will uplift me, that will help me rise as we are emerging into new times. That, my friends, is what we'll call for that opening, for the Spirit to touch our own intellect in that individual way, but then imagine what that means collectively to the consciousness of humanity. I love that vision, the old and the new standing side by side with rich possibilities right there in front of us. We know we can do this because we've all done it in one way or another. So think about these things this week. Think about these things. Take a breath. I know that was heavy. That was a lot. Take a nice deep cleansing breath and let's prepare ourselves for the words of prayer. Just feel the love of God right here in this room. Notice the way that love transmits through all the technology so that even as we sit in our private spaces listening to this prayer, that we are filled with an awareness of the love of God. Yes, right where we are, love. The fullness and the power, that greatest force of life, that is love. It is right here, right now. And it is that movement, that activity of life. We can feel it within us as we begin to recognize that some amazing truths have been spoken this day. And that perhaps there's only the tiniest little sliver of a gem that is the gift that we take home individually. Nonetheless, there is a sliver of a gem of truth. And so we grab that and we hold it and we allow it to invigorate us from the inside out. Because it is in that essence of the withinness of God, life, the way that intelligence that created all things is hovering even now around us and in us, waiting to spark us in our vision of a new reality of hope for humankind, of hope for this planet, of a future that is radiant with beauty, where we are healing ourselves as we recognize the ways we have separated ourselves, which only happens in our minds. For nothing can really separate us from our good, nor can we be separate from God in any way whatsoever. So here in this space of holy recognition of a greater truth, of a greater power, a power for good, something that we know is greater than we are, and yet we call on it, we use it, we speak our word of prayer, and we put our demand on the law. And so I know we are blessed this week by taking these intentions that have been stirred and noticing what comes up for us, of recognizing that for every challenge or problem we face, there is a spiritual solution that is urging its way in this great emergence so that we might rise and see things from that higher view. I'm so grateful to know that this is how spiritual law works. This is how life exhibits the ongoingness, the insistence on the part of life for greater life. And so right now, we open ourselves. We create that space. We are conscious and we are aware of the movement of that spirit in our own being, in this room, in our lives, in our families, and that there is a healing power that is present with an urgency for us to return to our wholeness, to see the truth of our connection to each other and to all of life. We see life this day in all its brilliant holiness, and we turn our back to any idea of an ailing world. Instead, we see that the world is shifting and changing because it is very complex, and that Spirit knows how to create out of what appears to be breaking apart. So we trust this day. We trust and we stand strong in our faith. And wherever there is any sense of absence or limitation in our own lives, we just let go of that to open ourselves to a new reality. We stand on the cusp of this newness, and together we call it forward and we allow it to express through us in these mighty ways so that we can be a part of all the new that is emerging on the planet right now. I say thank you, God. Thank you, life. Thank you, infinite Spirit. How wonderful it is to feel connected in this spiritual community in this conversation and in our very own lives. I give thanks and I release the words of this prayer into that law that always says, yes, my child, yes, yes. And so it is. Amen. Amen.
Grateful, grateful, grateful for all the love that I have. I am so grateful, grateful, grateful for all the love that I have. Everywhere I look and every face I see, this love reflected shining back to me. I just give thanks for all these simple things, the joy and peace that gratitude brings. That's why I'm grateful, grateful, grateful for all the love that I have. I am so grateful, grateful, grateful for all the love that I have.
Oh, we are so grateful for the Bradfords. Thank you. So I'll tell you, Reverend Karen, one of the things that I always do is I always ask the question, what is the truth that needs to be revealed here? And just keep asking that question, and the answer will always come. So now is the time to celebrate the abundance of our lives and the abundance of our community as we come together and give in our giving of our good. Just want to remind everybody that we are still not passing the offering plate. We have the drop box in the back of the room and also in the bookstore, so you can drop off your beautiful loving donations there. So let's say our giving affirmation together. I live in a consciousness of good. Divine love blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God, and so it is.
Please rise for our final song. Oh, it feels so good to be alive. Sing that. Oh,
We will have practitioner available for prayer after service, immediately after service. If anything's going on in your life and you want prayer, please look for Sue. And we also have prayer request box in the back, so don't forget that. Classes are coming up. Cheryl is now providing a printed sheet of the announcements so that you can grab it in case you're not on the newsletter list. You can look in the bookstore area and you'll know what classes are coming up and what the details of that are. But we also have all that stuff in the newsletter. That's your best source to stay connected to us, is that weekly. We only blast it once a week. And so you can do that, and also tell Cheryl if you're not on that list and you want to be. Drum Circle happening today at 2 p.m., not right after service, but at 2 p.m. And then I have some sad news. And I know that it's been a while since the Gaylords were here, but Mike Gaylord made his transition last week. And we will be having a service for him. The family's planning something beautiful, and I will be leading us through that celebration of life for Mike, and that will happen on September 18th at 10 a.m. So prayers and blessings to the family, because it's a tough time to go through. And so I want to close with an affirmation. So repeat after me. No matter what happened yesterday,
No matter what happened yesterday,
I rise triumphant today.
I rise triumphant today.
That's it. Well done. Thanks for being here, everybody. I love you. Remember, pray often, love much.